sweaty. Oh yeah, it's sweltering summer in Phoenix. How about this humidity? I ironed my hair today. It was perfectly straight, and then I step outside for 1 second and whoop. I look like Bill Cosby's love child. All right, that's one. He said something very clever lately. I'm not going to repeat because I got work to do, but you can Google his name and read what he said. It was very clever, very smart. I don't usually compliment him, but I don't insult him, but I don't usually seek out wisdom from Bill Cosby. I think that skipped my generation somewhere. But tonight, I invite you all to receive totally unsought out marriage counseling. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Doesn't that make sense? Doesn't that make sense for the people in the room? Doesn't that make sense for people in TV land? You know, I don't ever get to do this, so I'm doing it tonight because I landed on 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And it'll be very interesting because I have no idea how the Holy Spirit will make this relevant and pertinent to every one of us, no matter what stage of life we're in or what we're seeking in our life or running away from in our life as far as being married. But I just think this is fascinating stuff, so indulge me. But you know, the good news about TV land is that, who knows, I mean, we're reaching all kinds of people, right? So I know at least one of you needs to hear this. But we all need to hear this, so it'll be interesting to see what it is we need to hear. This is not rehearsed. Now, concerning the things of which he wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Crickets, crickets. And likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. That doesn't sound so bad when it's that way, does it? You know, most guys are like, okay, if you want to use me for sex, you can, but, you know, women want some respect here. I own you, damn it. You know, if a woman says to a man, come here, I own you. He's like, okay. Beats watching The Bachelorette. Okay, sorry. I have no idea where I am. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. Men never suggest that, just so you know. Men never say, honey, let's take some time off so we can fast and pray for a while. That never happens, just so this is God's way of giving women a break, okay? That you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again so that Satan doesn't tempt you, meaning the husband, because of your lack of self-control. Okay, I'm not done. I think I'll read it all, or at least a lot of it. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment, for I wish that all men were even as I myself, meaning single, ugly, crappy personality, and totally used of God 24/7, and is probably for the best because no girl would have liked him. That's historically pretty accurate about Paul, what we know about Paul. Well, let's just say, for the sake of tonight, Paul was saying, I'm single and I'm staying that way till the day I die to serve the Lord. Okay? For I wish that all men were even as I myself, but each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But he sounds like saying, yeah, whatever. I wish you're all like me, but okay, everyone has their own gift. You get that one, you get that one, whatever. But I say to the unmarried and the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Have you ever noticed that people say, when they quote this, they just say it's better to marry than to burn? I've heard that so many times. Like, why don't you finish the sentence than to burn with passion? It doesn't say lust, it says passion. There is a difference. So if you have all these feelings and needs inside you, then it's not good to let you suffer. Unless you're born gay in America, oh, I'm sorry, that was for another night. We're just going to let you suffer. Okay? I'm sorry. You know I couldn't resist it. But again, I got to make this applicable to everybody in here, including myself. Hello. I get to eat here too, and everybody in TV land. But I want to go back and talk about what's being said here. Paul starts this by saying, I received a letter from you asking me a question. So we have to guess what the question is, because we don't know. So we have to then step back and go, the answer is for who asked the question. This is not doctrine. So, you know, whoever asked the question may be the leader of this church. Paul said, yeah, I think you do better at this stage of the game to stay exactly as you are and be like me, because we're being persecuted. And now is not the time when we're being persecuted and we're starting a new church for you to get totally sidetracked and goo-goo-eyed. Remember Thumper? Thumper was totally like normal and sober and clear and Bambi's best friend, but the minute Thumper fell in love, he's like, ugh! You know, he's like totally like in another world. Try starting a church with someone who falls in love. They're totally useless. Totally useless. But this was the church. This wasn't a church. This was the church. This was it. And they were all doomed. They were going into it knowing they were doomed to death for worshiping Christ. So they're saying maybe now's not the time, you know, for, you know, you taking your little hottie to Starbucks. But he wasn't talking about anything that had to do with future generations here. But he's saying, if you are going to struggle with sexual purity, then you're better off marrying. But I still say, you should be more like me. But everybody's different, I get it. So if you need to be married, you need to be married. But, you know, once you get married, remember, she owns you and you own her. That makes it very hard to be totally separate and single before the Lord. Now you have a two-headed monster, otherwise known as the push me pull you. And you guys have to come into agreement and accord in all these things before the Lord, and we are being persecuted and we're starting the new church. This is a lot here. And remember, at the time of this writing, it was Jewish tradition for young marrieds to take a year off and spend a whole year just spending time with each other, not working, not having any other responsibility. Ain't that a luxury? So he's looking at, you're going to meet someone, you're going to have to get married really fast, you guys don't know each other, there's a lot of adjusting going on here, and you're going to be useless to the church for at least a year, if not permanently, depending on how your marriage goes. Now to the marry I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Now he's pulling rank. Now he's saying, this isn't my opinion anymore. A wife is not to depart from her husband, but even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and a husband is not to divorce his wife. He's saying, this is how we're going to act in church from now on. But to the rest, I, not the Lord, say, if any brother has a wife who does not believe, and she's willing to live with him, let him not divorce her. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, if he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. But if the unbelieving husband, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. It's interesting. Christian divorce is at an all-time high. The only thing that it's equal to in divorce statistics is divorce in the world. It's the same. It's the same statistics. Yet, Paul says here, don't get a divorce. But, he says, but this is me talking. If you're married to an unbelieving spouse and they're cool with you, stay married to them. And vice versa. And what's interesting about that is, he says, but if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. It's interesting because Paul speaks of togetherness. And we are not a religion of togetherness, statistically in our marriages. But Paul says, but it's my opinion that if your unbelieving husband or wife leaves you, let him go. We're totally cool with that. We teach that as doctrine in Christianity. If your unbelieving spouse leaves you, you're free. Like it's doctrine. But he said himself, but he said, but to the rest, I, not the Lord, say. He was just saying his opinion. We have built a doctrine on his opinion and ignored what he said the Lord said. Just so you know, this is just all, basically this is trivia at this point. Not trivial, of course. But if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. But God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? It's so funny because just a second ago, he says that we sanctify our unsaved spouse. And yet he says, how do you know you're going to save your spouse? It's interesting. Because he kind of contradicts himself in the same paragraph. But not exactly, because he knows the difference in what he's saying. He's saying that your unsaved spouse who's willing to stay, there's a chance. But if they walk out on you, they depart from you, don't just let them go, because how do you know you're going to save them? You can spend your whole life chasing them down. It's interesting. He says a lot of, you need to be with your husband or wife, but you don't need to be with your husband or wife but you really need to be with them, but don't think you're going to save someone else who doesn't want to be saved. A lot of work there. A lot of work. So here, let me explain to you something. Let me explain something. In any marriage, opposite sex, same sex, in any marriage, we are choosing to become the two-headed monster. No one likes that I call it that. I get on my hands and knees and pull out a diamond ring and say, I love you more than anything, or will you become the second head of my two-headed monster? You know, no one's really going to like that. But you are the two-headed monster. You become the same person. You become the same person. I wish I had a picture for that face. And but you become the same person. And I remember my favorite episode of I Love Lucy is a dream, an entire episode that was a dream that Lucy has that's done as a musical. And Lucy is a McGillicuddy, and she's roaming Scotland, and it turns out that every year they need to sacrifice a McGillicuddy to the two-headed dragon. I'm in love with the dragon's dinner. Oh my gosh. I can't go watch it because it's not on anything I have, and I couldn't find it anywhere online to watch it. It's my favorite Lucy episode. And you see the two-headed dragon, it's Fred and Ethel dressed up as a two-headed dragon, and all they do is bicker, just like they do in real life. And that's what I see. That's what I see as a married couple that hasn't figured out what they are yet. They have not figured out what they are yet. They're a bickering two-headed dragon. Well, one wants to go this way, one wants to go this way. One, it's like conjoined twins that don't get along. Another thing you don't want to say when you propose. Baby, will you be my conjoined twin? So God created something called marriage. That we call, that we call marriage. That we call marriage. Adam and Eve were not married. Well, when were they married? Tell me when it happens in the Bible. When did they get married? When did a man leave his mother and a woman leave her home, and they shall travel on together where the two shall be as one? There is love. When did that happen? No. God took something out of Adam and created more Adam with it. They were Adam and Adam. They were just Adam. She didn't become Eve till after the fall, so they weren't married. They never got married. They lived in sin. Seriously. I love all these arguments. God made Adam and Eve. Well, what exactly? He didn't actually make Adam and Eve. Actually, this fallen man made Adam and Eve. They were just Adam. Very complicated here. But God made something that was totally ruined and distorted in the fall. So whatever we have that we are, God, we're going to go to war in our own country over, is plan B at best. Because God did not make separate individuals to meet and date and get married. He didn't. There's no evidence of that. He never did that. That's not what he did with Adam and Eve. He didn't give Adam a choice. Adam didn't want a choice. It's a lot to think about. A lot to think about. I've said this before. Marriage, sex, procreation, every single thing we think is so normal and natural to us were totally different before sin happened. So we have no idea what really took place, but what I will tell you is God did not perform a wedding in the Garden of Eden. Unless you just want to have a fairy tale that you believe, and it's a sweet one. That he had some kind of moment where he blessed the both of them and all that. It's an account, and that part of it's not in it. I'll just say this. Maybe he did. It's not important. Wasn't important enough for him to put it in the Bible. It's a lot to think about. He's cool with the talking snake. Interesting. The stuff that made it in of the account of the first man and partner, a lot's left out. So all of a sudden we're fighting for, and this is not about marriage equality tonight, but it's a really nice thing to think about. All of a sudden we're fighting for something that doesn't exist. We're fighting for something that doesn't exist. And before anyone asks me and anybody writes me, it is our culture, it is our, I hate this word, religion. So this is what we do. We make a public declaration before man and God to make a lifelong commitment to our partner. Anyone who's ever made a real commitment to anyone in their life knows that as fun as a wedding can be, and guess which part's my favorite?
The food.
The cake. You got to narrow it down. But the food, but yeah, the cake. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing in the world like wedding cake. So I'll endure a wedding if there's cake at the end of it. But I have to find out who made the cake first. You know, I'm from Los Angeles. I know the better cake makers. But we're fighting for something that doesn't exist. That we live in a time where it's appropriate to make a commitment to someone before man and God. But if we're not going to live up to it, it's irrelevant. And if we live up to it, we have nobody to answer to. Because we lived up to it. So, once upon a time, you know, we used to drag our spouse into a tent and we were married. I like it. I like it. Especially if there's clubbing involved. And, well, you know, then they don't fight back. And all of a sudden, we used to have a party to celebrate a contract that had nothing to do with the young couple getting married. It had to do with what the families were going to make off of it. And what was going to happen to everybody's assets as families combine. That the marriage ritual was really about a combining of clan. Actually, the only romantic wedding in the Bible that's anything like the fantasy that I have about marriage has to do with us being the bride of Christ. Everything else is kind of, well, it's business. It's business and brouhaha and pooey. And I don't like going to weddings because you have to dress up. And I like to play dress up, but I don't like to dress up. And I sure as hell don't like someone telling me what I'm wearing. You know what I'm saying? I don't like, and then you have to sit still. Then you have to listen to a bunch of stuff. And before you can ever get to the only good part, the cake, you have to watch a bunch of drunk people make like roasty toasts at people's expense. Then you have to watch the first dance, and this has to happen, then they have to smush cake in each other's face. But no, you can't smush cake in the bride's face. No, only the groom can. Weddings suck. But the cake is good. I say show up late. Oh my gosh, I had a flat tire. Where's the cake? But it's all a bunch of stuff. All a bunch of stuff. But we're sure fighting over it. We're sure fighting over it. But it's not in the Bible. Well, were you saying marriage is in the Bible? I'm saying marriage as we know it is pretty shaky in the Bible. A lot of business here. Well, marriage is business. It's a business contract between man and woman. Well, great. Let some men and women get into business together. Let's stay out of it. Let's stay out of it. I'm so convinced we all need to stay out of it, including me. But I respect the fact that this is our culture and this is our religion. And by the way, those are two things that the Bible says we should not be conformed to. But I realize that it's just too late for the church, that if I ever want to cohabitate in this life with someone, I will make a public declaration of my commitment before man and God. But trust me, there will be a little bit of eye rolling on my part doing it, because I'll be like, in all fairness, I've seen relationships in this life, I mean friendships, and the only thing that's lasted shorter than my marriages have been most of my friendships. So it's a little weird to, it's like jumping through hoops. It's like jumping through hoops. And this is something I've discussed with so many ministers. I said, can you show me in the Bible where it says I have to do it in front of a room full of people? Well, you can't. Can you show me in the Bible where it says I have to do it in front of anyone? You can't. Maybe you could have an argument of having to confess it to somebody, much like confessing that you've accepted the Lord. But in all fairness, isn't that a little vague in the Bible too? What exactly what hoops do you have to jump through to be officially saved? It seems like salvation is a spiritual matter. You know what I'm saying? That in the end, we don't know exactly when someone gets saved. I have a point in time, where I know the date and time, that I raised my hand, but I was probably saved months before. I was probably saved the second Jesus knocked on my heart's door and I went, yes. Because he knew what was coming. He knew how open my heart was. Just took some education in my head, but my heart was already into it. It's interesting. People who have been married, people who are married, know that the commitment happens long before the date. You know why? Because when you get on your knees and propose to someone, you're making one hell of a commitment, aren't you? That's probably when you got married in the eyes of God. Oh, unless, okay, we're not going to go there tonight. But seriously, we're so screwed up on this. We're so screwed up. And if you think about it, we're fundamentally screwed up on so much that, as hard as I thought it would be to tie this into everyday Christian life, we put more emphasis on how and why and when and where and who gets to get married we do on how people get saved. It's funny, we do not bash people over the head to get saved. Well, I do. But a lot of people don't. But they'll just, if you ask them about gay marriage, they have a lot to say in the workplace, in public. And God bless them, they have an opinion. I won't say it, but I'm thinking it. But, you know, they have an opinion. That's fine. But if you think about it, we put so much emphasis on something so trivial as marriage compared to salvation. And I've said to people, I wonder, as much time as you've spent in the past decade talking about your opinion of marriage, have you spent that much time talking to people about their souls? I'm curious. Because most Christians don't. See, we're uncomfortable doing that, and we're comfortable taking an issue. That's safe. That's the way to let everyone know we're a Christian. That's the way to let God know we haven't denied Him among men. But He's like saying, well, in all fairness, you have never told anybody about me. You just told everybody about what I think. So it's interesting. But if you start taking marriage principles and apply them to every other thing in your life, if you take marriage principles and you apply them to business, having a business partner, and you recognize that once you have a business partner, it's not just yours anymore, it's theirs, and it's not theirs, it's yours, and you're now the two-headed monster. And you start thinking about anything that you do with anyone, now you've become one with them. That's why Paul talks about being unequally yoked. Because if you hang out with some friends, you become part of an entity. You're now part of this entity. You've become one with this group. So when you're in this environment, you're one with this, you're one with this, you're one with this, you're one with this. This is how it is in every aspect of our life. You know, we're not the individual sitting at Denny's, but we're the table over there. We're the thing. You know, how many of us there are there? We're the thing. And Paul says, you would be better off not becoming a thing when you are stepping out for the Lord, because there's a lot of responsibility, and when you take on another person in any endeavor, you become them. You know, Terry always says, when you hang out with the wrong people, you know, thinking you're going to bring them up, that doesn't happen, they pull you down. And that's exactly what Paul is saying. Saying, the best of what that partner, spouse thing in any endeavor that you become one with is what you're going to be now. You won't be better than them. And we always, oh my gosh, we always get married hoping that we're going to be better than our spouse, that they'll look up to us. So a lot of people, probably a guy thing, but I know more women that have done that than men, but a lot of people marry below their intelligence, below their education, below their spiritual growth, below them, beneath them. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe it's under the guise of I'm gonna fix them, or I'm gonna be a leader. But there's a lot of ego involved that says it kind of makes me feel good that they look up to me and I'm smarter than they are. Well, you are as dumb as your spouse. Anyone who has a drunk spouse or partner knows that you are as dumb as they are. That when they make an ass out of themselves at a party, you go down with them. No one ever says, you're so great. Oh, but they're so awful. They're like, why did you bring that person here? It's your fault. You're the designated driver. Drive to another party if that's what you're going to bring. And that's like that in every aspect of life. Good marriage counsel is marry up. Marry up. Marry someone who's smarter than you. Marry someone that's better than you. Marry someone that's nicer than you. Marry someone that walks with Jesus in a more exemplary way than you do. And in anything you do, not just